NFL draft coverage continues, and today we are joined by Jordan Reid from ESPN. And Jordan, the last time we talked, it was at the NFL Combine, and we had no idea what the Vikings were going to do when it came to addressing the quarterback position. Kirk Cousins was still under contract. We know how that situation has gone. Now, there is a huge void at the quarterback position. What are your thoughts on just the Vikings draft plans now, post-Combine?
Well, it's gotten very interesting since the Combine. As you mentioned, with Kirk Cousins now gone to Atlanta, the Vikings have really opened themselves up to a quarterback of the future. Sam Darnold is now already under contract for one season, so they have that short-term option already in place. But now, having two first-round picks, the Vikings open themselves up to a various amounts of possibilities. They can take a quarterback at 11 or 23. They could trade up, or they could even trade back. There's so many different situations that they could entertain here in the first round, having so many different picks.
If you were Kwesi in this situation, how would you approach this with two first-round picks?
Well, whenever you get those two first-round picks, especially now coming up from the second round to now having the 23 or the 23rd overall pick, you really want to get aggressive just because you want to go ahead and get your guy. Kwesi hasn't had that since he's taken over the Vikings, now entering year 3. He wants to model this team as far as what he wants it to be. He inherited Kirk Cousins over when he came over from his last stop. So now he wants to go out and get his guy, whether that's a J.J. McCarthy of Michigan, Drake May of North Carolina, or even Jaden Daniels of LSU, or even Michael Penix Jr. or Bo Nix. There's so many possibilities that he's open to now.
That flexibility leads me to my next question, because there have been reports, we know this time of the year on social media, there are so many smoky mirrors and so many false reports, but there has been a report that's kind of surfaced that says the Vikings could possibly look at their quarterback in the year 2025 versus this year's draft. Do you think the Vikings' future quarterback is in this year's draft?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
And, whenever they're aggressive with a trade like that, especially getting two first-round picks, now allowing Kirk Cousins to move on to Atlanta, I don't think the long-term quarterback is on the roster currently. And once again, they're going to have plenty of options in this draft class. It's just a matter of how aggressive do you want to be, or do you want to stay at 11 or even 23 to get your guy of the future?
What is aggressive versus conservative when addressing day one for this Minnesota Vikings team?
Obviously, trading up. That's what you call, I should say, aggressive. But also when you're giving up future draft capital in future years, that's also what you consider aggressive as well. We've seen plenty of teams in years past take the aggressive approach and it worked out for them. But also there's also the alternative of it not working out. But whenever you're a general manager, you're always going to think of the positivity of it happening. Go ahead and take a swing for it, just because I always say if you want to win the lottery, you have to buy a ticket. And that's what the Vikings are going to do right here, whether it's at 11 or 23. They've positioned themselves to essentially have a chance at winning the lottery with a young quarterback.
Now, that's a really good perspective. I remember you and I were talking about possible quarterbacks in some of the later rounds that could fit this Vikings team, and Spencer Rattler was one. There was a guy from Tulane that was another. Let's say the Vikings do decide to be aggressive and move up. Is there a quarterback that fits this Vikings scheme that could possibly go before the 11th overall pick?
Well, there's two guys that I think would be great fits, and the top one for me is Drake May of North Carolina. I was at the Pro Day last week, and I thought it was absolutely terrific, especially during the latter portions of the Pro Day. But as far as the arm strength, he has the prototypical size, 6'4", 230 pounds. He's very mobile. You're going to hear the names Josh Allen and Justin Herbert attached to him a lot. But there is some concerns with him from a footwork and decision-making standpoint. But at North Carolina, he just did not have adequate enough surroundings, in my opinion. The offensive line play was subpar. He didn't get his top weapon in Tez Walker until midway through the season, just because of the NCAA stuff that he was going through. But let's drop him in a situation and surround him with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and eventually healthy T.J. Hockenson, a young offensive tackle duo, Christian Darrisaw, and then also Brian O'Neill. What happens when he doesn't have to have a bunch of heavy lifting on his plate? So I think Drake May would be a really good fit in Minnesota. And then the second one would be J.J. McCarthy of Michigan, who is a little bit of a polarizing prospect, but when you talk to scouts and coaches, they absolutely rave about McCarthy throughout the pre-draft process. The one of all of the group that's been in a more pro-style offense and made some reads that he's going to have to do on the next level, but he's just very raw and inexperienced as a passer. So you're going to have to be very patient with JJ, but he's one of those players of where you have to envision a long-term future with him and don't just grade him on what he is right now just because of his inexperience.
Those are really good points. I think, but to your point that you said before, Kevin O'Connell has made this decision very flexible due to the fact that there are still 3 quarterbacks on the roster: Sam Darnold, Jaron Hall, and Nick Mullins in no particular order. But moving to the defensive side of the ball, we have seen the Vikings prioritize their dollars when it comes to pass rush in free agency. When it comes to pass coverage, what players or where should the Vikings start to look?
Well, with Flores, you always want to prioritize man coverage guys just because they play so much of it, but he does such a great job of disguising his coverages. You have to really bring in those guys that can mix and match, that can play, have experience in zone, but also they're reliable in man coverage as well. And luckily for the Vikings, this is a really good outside cornerback group through about the 3rd round, in my opinion. After that, there's a little bit of a drop off in this draft class, but them having pick 11 and 23, if they want to go the cornerback route, I think they're going to be right in the wheelhouse of a player like Tyrion Arnold of Alabama, even a Kool-Aid McKinstry, who was his teammate on the opposite side of the football. Quinion Mitchell of Toledo is another name that you're going to hear a lot about. And then also Nate Wiggins of Clemson is another one that has scouts buzzing a lot too.
That's awesome. Well, look, I'm going to end this interview the way we ended our last interview in Indianapolis at the Combine. You have a unique stat when it comes to a position group that the Vikings have not drafted in the 1st round since a certain year. Can you tell Vikings fans what that is?
Yeah, so the Vikings have not drafted an edge rusher inside of the top 2 rounds since 2004 and 2005 when they took Kenita Udeze and Erasmus James in back-to-back seasons. So it's time to invest in an edge rusher. Hint, hint, a little nudge on the shoulder for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. If he does want to go edge rusher, I definitely think it would be a good route, especially in a strong draft class at the top like this one.
A lot to get excited about. Jordan, appreciate your time today, man.
Thanks as always.